Thank you for joining with me. We are on day 55, chapter 3, Sane Perception, section 5, Perception versus Knowledge, and we are reading with the Course Companion's Guide. This is A Course in Miracles, complete and annotated edition, edited by Robert Perry. And again, this is day 55 of the reading. Perception versus knowledge. And if you'll please close your eyes and join me in a prayer. Dear God, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know about this book, about A Course in Miracles, about you, about me, and about everyone else. God, please allow me to have an open mind and a new experience. Thank you, God. Amen. Perception versus knowledge. You are confused about the difference between perception and knowledge. You will note that we have said very little about knowledge as yet. One of the exceptions is in the first correction formula for fear, which begins with know first. K-N-O-W, know first. Footnote 51. In chapter 1 of the text 48, know first that this is an expression of fear. The reason is because you must get your perceptions straightened out before you can know anything. To know is to be certain. Uncertainty merely means that you don't know. Knowledge is power because it is certain, and certainty is strength. 52. Knowledge is power comes from the Latin maxima scientia polenta est, usually attributed to Francis Bacon. Its usual meaning is that having information grants one power to control one's world. Here it means that direct awareness of true reality results in certainty, a state of psychological strength. Perception is temporary. It is an attribute of the space-time belief and is therefore subject to fear or love. Misperception produces fear, and true perception induces love. Neither produces certainty because all perception varies. That is why it is not knowledge. True perception is the basis for knowledge, but knowing is the affirmation of truth. All your difficulties ultimately stem from the fact that you do not recognize or know yourself or your brother or God. Recognize means to know again. 53. Recognize is a modification of Old French I cannot speak French, so reconnaître, I don't know, to know again. So it's a modification of an old French word, to know again. This means you knew before. Note that it does not mean saw before. You can see in many ways because perception involves different interpretations. And this means it is not whole. The miracle is a way of perceiving, not a way of knowing. It is the right answer to a question, but you do not ask questions at all when you know. Questioning delusions is the first step in undoing them. The miracle or the right answer corrects them. Since perceptions change, their dependence on time is obvious. They are subject to transitory states, and this implies variability by definition. How do you perceive at any given time determines what you do, and action must occur in time. Knowledge is timeless because certainty is not questionable. You know when you have ceased to ask questions. The questioning mind perceives itself in time and therefore looks for future answers. 54. The quotation marks around questioning mind suggest that Jesus is referring to the usual concept of an intellectually curious and inquisitive mind. The unquestioning mind is closed merely because it believes that the future and the present will be the same. This establishes an unchanged state or stasis. This is usually an attempt to counteract an underlying fear that the future will be worse than the present, and this fear inhibits the tendency to question at all. Visions are a natural perception of the spiritual eye, but they are still corrections. The spiritual eye is symbolic and therefore not a device for knowing. It is, however, a means of right perception, which brings it into the proper domain of the miracle, but not of revelation. Properly speaking, a vision of God is a miracle rather than a revelation. The fact that perception is involved at all removes the experience from the realm of knowledge. That is why these visions do not last. Note that the term insight, though referring to lofty perception, is not an attribute of knowledge. 55. Insight refers to seeing deeply into something. It thus belongs to the realm of perception, not knowledge. This is why terms like lofty are meaningless in this context. Insight is not the way to knowledge, but it is a prerequisite for knowledge. Being of God, knowledge has nothing to do with your perceptions at all. That is why it can only be a gift of God to you. An ancient proverb instructs you to know thyself or be certain. 56. Footnote 56. In the notes, this quote is ascribed to the Bible, which is incorrect. It actually comes from ancient Greece and was inscribed in the forecourt of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Certainty is always of God. When you love someone, you have perceived him as he is, and this makes it possible for you to know him. But it is not until you recognize him that you know him. Only then are you able to stop asking questions about him. While you ask questions about God, excuse me one moment. While you ask questions about God, you are clearly implying that you do not know him. Certainty does not require action. When you say you are acting on the basis of sure knowledge, you are really confusing perception and knowledge. Knowledge brings mental strength for creative thinking, but not for right doing. Perception, miracles, and doing are closely related. Knowledge is a result of revelation and induces only thought. Perception involves the body, even in its most spiritualized form. Knowledge comes from the altar within and is timeless because it is certain. To perceive the truth is not the same as knowing it. This is why students may have so much trouble with integrating this course. The tentative perception of some is too uncertain for knowledge because knowledge is sure. The perception of others is so variable that they can swing from sudden but real knowledge to complete cognitive disorganization. Footnote 57. Cognitive disorganization refers to distractibility, difficulty in concentrating, and a tendency for thoughts to become derailed and tangential. This disorganized thought shows up in disorganized speech. The reference to two types of people here, those who are too uncertain for knowledge and those who swing from genuine knowledge to cognitive disorganization, originally referred to Bill and Helen, respectively. If you attack another's error, you will hurt yourself. You do not recognize him when you attack. attack is always made on a stranger. You are making him a stranger by misperceiving him so that you cannot know him. It is because you have made him into a stranger that you are afraid of him. What is he to you? He is your brother. What else do you need to know? But do know that this is not a matter of perception but of fact. Perceive him correctly so that you can know him. The prayer for the miracle is... Oops, sorry. I think I skipped a page. Oh, okay, I apologize. It's down here. Jesus, help me to see my brother as he really is, and thus release both him and me. Jesus, help me see my brother as he is, and thus release both him and me. Anytime there is anything unloving that crosses your mind, you should immediately recognize that you do not want to hurt your brother. 58. Helen originally inserted this parenthetical mark at this point, parentheses, regarding sex, possession, etc. This referred to inappropriate sexual attraction and most likely desire to possess another sexually, in addition to anything else unloving that crosses your mind. You should immediately recognize that you do not want to hurt your brother. Right perception is necessary before God can communicate directly to his own altars, which he has established in his sons. There he can communicate his certainty, and his knowledge will bring the peace without question. God is not a stranger to his own sons, and his sons are not strangers to each other. Knowledge preceded both perception and time, and will also ultimately replace or correct for them. Replace and correct for both time and perception. This is the real meaning of the biblical account of God as Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Footnote number 59. Revelation 21:6. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. The Course's usage of this means that God's knowledge of his sons was there in the beginning before time, and will be there after time is done. It also explains the quotation, before Abraham was, I am. Footnote 60. John 8:58. Jesus said unto them, Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Here this seems to mean, before time was, knowledge is. Perception can and must be stabilized, but knowledge is stable, and that's footnote. Oh no, haha. Sorry, there's so many footnotes here. Fear God and keep his commandment. Let me try again. Thank you for your patience with me, by the way, and my mispronunciation. Fear God and keep his commandments is the real scribal error. 61. Here we go again. Ecclesiastes, I don't know if I said that right. 12:13. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It should read, know God and accept his certainty. This error is why the commandments are almost all negative, in contrast to my statement, Thou shalt love. 62. Mark 12:29. And Jesus answered him, The first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. Jesus' point about the 10 Commandments seems to be that they're largely negative quality, in that they are mostly prohibitions against certain behaviors, comes from the error of viewing God as fearful. There are no strangers in God's creation. To create as He created, you can create only what you know and accept as yours. God knows His children with perfect certainty. He created them by knowing them. He recognizes them perfectly. When they do not recognize each other, they do not recognize Him. Brothers can misperceive one another, but they rarely maintain that they do not know each other. This is possible only if they maintain that they are not really brothers. I thank you for joining with me in A Course in Miracles, CE edition. I'm just going to read Robert Perry's notes. And again, I want to thank you for, I'm sitting in my car at lunch and it's about to storm. But I just want to thank you for joining with me with this reading and for putting up with my errors and mispronunciations and mumbling. It's funny that I do this because I was very introverted and I mumbled a lot growing up, and I still can see how I mumble, but I think of my dad, who would always say, "Don't mumble." So it's interesting that I do this today. But anyway, day 55, section 5, perception versus knowledge. And I do this because it helps me, of course. And if it helps anyone else, what a blessing that is. So thank you. The commentary for this review is from Robert Perry, editor of the complete and annotated edition of A Course in Miracles. I fancy myself more of a writer than I do a somebody who can pronounce in big words. I've always had a hard time with pronunciation, and actually I think this is helping me. It's helping me a lot. This section is the big introduction to the topic of knowledge. As such, it's a very important section. To really appreciate this section, I love this section, I think 2 things are needed. First, we need to understand that in talking about knowledge, he is talking about a model of awareness that is fundamentally different from our normal mode. Open mind, new experience. Perception is what is normal for us now, so we know this condition well. Our perceptions are variable and temporary. They slide easily along a continuum between fear and love. They involve questioning and seeking answers, or shutting the mind down and refusing to question. Most basically of all, they always involve some degree of uncertainty. This is because perception is based on the subject-object dichotomy. In perception, we are separate from what we are trying to know. Being separate from it, how can we truly know it? To some degree, then, we are always guessing. Since perception is the sum total of our experience in this world, we naturally assume knowledge is a variable on perception, presumably a really high version of perception. But Jesus is clear here that even in its most spiritualized form, perception falls short of knowledge. Even a vision of God is outside the gate of heaven. Knowledge is completely other, whereas we can move by degrees along the spectrum of perception toward higher and higher levels. The Course will make clear later on that we can't get to knowledge by such quantitative shifts. Only a qualitative leap, a leap from everything familiar, can get us from perception to knowledge. For the 2 domains are discontinuous. The reason that they are is that in knowledge the subject-object dichotomy is not just softened, it is gone. So we are no longer trying in vain to know an object from outside of it. Now we are inside of it, and it is inside of us. Now there is no room for any uncertainty whatsoever. Imagine being in a state in which your knowing of a thing and the thing itself are one and the same. How could you remain uncertain? In the realm of knowledge, then, we are not a separate subject surrounded by a world of objects that remain frustratingly out of the reach of our knowing. Rather, we are an unbounded subject that is literally inside all other subjects who are also inside of us. Thus we know everyone from the inside such that their being and our awareness of their being are the same thing. In other words, our awareness of their being is their being. In the same fashion, our awareness of God is God. When we get a sense of just how different this is, it can sound alien, disorienting, and somewhat threatening. But this leads me to my second point about this section, and that is that in the realm of perception, we are all in a state of fundamental anxiety that only knowledge can cure. I know you can't see that yet. Hold on. Knowledge can cure. The fact is that uncertainty, which is part and parcel with perception, is incredibly uncomfortable. Our entire experience, including our emotional state, is based on our picture of things, our understanding of what's what. Thus, when that understanding is uncertain, when we don't know what's what, we don't know what to think or what to feel. Think about when you are with a person and you really have no idea what to make of that person. It's extremely destabilizing. You have no solid ground on which to stand. You don't know what to feel or what to do. Everything inside of you is up in the air. That destabilizing uncertainty is the state of perception. In perception, everything in us is always to some degree up in the air. And the anxiety of that state, the state we live in all the time, is simultaneously a constant yearning for its opposite, for the absolute certainty, rest, and peace of knowledge. Key passage. All of your difficulties ultimately stem from the fact that you do not recognize or know yourself, your brother, or God. And that's all he wrote. So we're raining now. Thank you for joining with me. I love you. Have a beautiful day.